Today we're talking about what we love about our garden or in our garden or what fills our heart. And at this time of year, hearts and flowers just go together. So I thought that we'd start with a little quick way to put some background color into a heart, and then we can put flowers on top of that in our sketchbooks. I've already done some in my sketchbook, and now I think I want to just create a number of others, in this case 6 more, that I can use either by pasting in or as part of a card, an element in a card. So what I'm going to do, I've taped these off symmetrically. Tape them off however you'd like to do. This is 140-pound watercolor, Arches watercolor paper. I have a little stencil, but I'm not thrilled with the fact that it's scalloped around the edges, but I'm going to start with that because it's just going to make things easier. What I want to do is fill, starting on this side and working across, if you're right-handed, or the opposite if you're left, I want to fill each of these little spaces with a heart, and then I'll let them dry, come back in and do some stamping and different things with gold to create some interest texturally. And then once that's dry, we can add some flowers, and that would be what we'd like to do for our sketchbook. And when, in terms of talking about some plant in particular or something about our garden, the hummingbirds or the moths or the dragonflies that we love. So I'm going to start with a little water, just clear water. And I'm going to begin with watercolors because that's the easiest way and what you most likely have. But there's a lot of other media that we could use in the same exact way. So I'll just do one in each media. You can just pick one that you like. And as I said, watercolor is perfectly fine. Let's start with that. So now you probably can't see that. If I were able to turn this, you could see it glisten and know that that's wet. So I'm bringing out my really fun watercolor palette with everything in the world in it and a towel to wipe my brush on. And I'm going to just start randomly picking up colors. And in this first one, I want it to be sort of lavendery, purpley, so that I could do some lilacs or cherry blossoms or something on it later. And I'm just touching wherever I've put water down, and it's going to just kind of travel. And I'm not going to do it with any great intention. I want to do this in a way that it's just very free-flowing and not a lot of thought. And so here I go saying not a lot of thought, and I'm having a hard time picking another color. I just grabbed this one because it's kind of a bluish purple, which is off camera and you can't really see. But again, I'm just touching, and because I can't really see where the water is, it's a little risky, but you might be able to pick yours up, and if you have it on a board, and kind of look to see where you put that. Now I can always add more water. The trick in this method is to just put it down and get out and not play around too much, because that's when you start turning into mud and things that you don't intend to have happen. So I put in a little yellow there, and I'm not sure I like that. So I'm going to pick up a more yellowy orange one and just kind of touch that across the top here. Don't want a lot of that. And then I'll travel into some pinks, but for the most part I'm going to keep this one all in that family of purples and lavendery blues. Let's go with this brighter color right here. Whoops, that did not pick any up. This is an unmarked one, so I have no idea what color it is, which makes it even more fun, right? So not a lot of thought here. And I don't have to cover every single inch, and I'm not going to in this case. I'm going to just put in a little more of that blue, periwinkle, or whatever you might call this color, and let it run and play how it wants. And this will be very light when it dries, and that's okay in this instance because I plan to cover it up with a lot of flowers. But it might be beautiful just on its own and make it a beautiful card element. So there's the first one, and I'm not going to do anything else to that. I'm just going to let it dry and move over to the next one, which I'm going to start in the same way with some water. I'm moving my watercolors out of the way because in this instance, I'm using the Dr. P.H. Barton's concentrated watercolors. They're highly, intensely concentrated. So I Probably should let that dry before I do this because I might get on it with this stencil and smear it. I'm going to go ahead and wet this area again, just like I did in the last one. Only this time I'm just going to drop the color. With the reason I picked that particular brand is they have eyedroppers, so I can actually just drop the color on there. And this one I expect will be much darker and more intense in color, and that's just fine. Again, having trouble seeing where the water is, but I know it's there. So I'm just going to drop it, and look what happens when you drop this on water. It's going to stop where there isn't any water, hopefully. That's the plan anyway. Let's pick up a little purple here and see what happens. And this one has a lid problem, if I remember right. Yes, that's not going to come off. So we'll stick to these reds and browns. This is called saddle brown. Some of these have been sitting in the sun over here for so long that the lids are glued on. Now that's quite dark, but it's okay because I'm going to lighten some of this up with water in a minute. I'll drop a little water in there, but let's put one more color. This is mahogany. So it's all these reds and browns, which should be absolutely stunning. And now let's drop some more water on there just to kind of get these to play together. But the trick again is to just, once they start to, once you've gotten in here, get right back out again so that you don't make mud. You want it to be very loose and flowing. I'm really struggling to see where the wet parts are. Hopefully I can just push it up to that edge. But you do see how it just stops when it gets to the part that has not had water applied to it, which is great. And even if it didn't, it'd be fairly easy to just kind of create your own heart shape. You don't have to make it be absolutely perfect, because we're going to come back and do some textural stuff on top of this anyway. But starting to run that risk, although I don't like it where it looks almost like an eye, two different eyes. So I'm going to try and blend between these two to soften that. Let it go and let it dry, and I'll come back to that. Now this one's not centered, but it's okay. When I pull this off, I can cut them and separate them. So the next one, I'm going to try alcohol inks. Same deal. Wet it first. I try not to make it be so off-center this time. And I'm wetting the whole area. This time you'll be able to see it better because there's water starting to get dirty. And so now I can see there's a little pink tinge to it. And I'll be able to see where I am. All right, I see two areas because it can see this time where it didn't get wet. And I'm going to bring that up a little. I'm changing my heart shape. All right, now, same deal. This is these very intense colors. I'm just going to drop in, and then I probably switch back to the watercolor because that's pretty easy. Although marker's also very fun. So here's some very beautiful colored, pink color named Fiesta. This doesn't have a dropper. It does have a little tip on it where I can just do that. And I'll do some more of those. 3 colors might be about enough. This one's called Gumball. Guess what color that's going to be, right? And that splattered a little bit, which is fine. And these don't travel as much unless you put something else in there. In this case, I'm going to use a little bit of alcohol, and you'll see what magic happens when you do that. It's just going to make these things play with one another really in fun ways. I'm going to find another maybe purple. Let's try a little purple here. This one's called Boysenberry. And let's see what happens with this. And that's very dark, but we'll make it lighter here in just a second. I can add a little bit of water to make them move a little bit, and they just do all kinds of really beautiful things. It's nice to get in there and move them right away because they start to stain. Like you can see where the pink is really sort of stained, and I'd have to add some more pink to get anything else to happen in there, which I can do readily. Let's just add a little bit more pink in here so it's not quite so spotted, and a little bit more of the other red. And that one will be really fun to play with. And let's get them to move. And then I'll get out of there because I just don't want them to be too overworked. And let's Let's see with a little more of the alcohol what happens here. Oh, that's going to do some cool stuff. And then I'm going to stay away from this one and move on to the next. And this time, I'm going to do the gigantic heart here. No, that's a little bit too big. I'll stay with this one. And I'll get the area wet and then show you what happens with markers. If you have some of the Tombow water-soluble markers, they're pretty fun too. And then we'll go to watercolor again. They all work. It's just kind of fun to be able to try some different things sometimes. But only if you have those. Don't sweat about it if you don't have them, the different media that I've got. It's just fine to have watercolor. This time I'm going to play a little longer because I really like the effect of these Tombow markers. And so I'll just, again, pick some colors. I think in this case I'm going to start with some greens. And this is pretty dark. Now you can go directly into the water. That's one way you can do it. And I do quite like the effect. I like that you can trail off and make it look sort of veiny. You can use the writing end as well as the brush end. And again, this randomness, the effects of having it quite random. Now, you can also take it directly off the tip with a paintbrush in a little water, and then it works a little more like watercolor, but I'm not getting quite the intensity, and this might be one of mine that has dried out. They get old. So let's try another that looks like a very similar color, if not the same. And it's a lot darker, so that's what I'm after. I just want the sides of this. I was thinking this one would be nice to have a little cherry blossom tree going on, and have this be the background of what might look a little bit leafy. And I'm just pressing and turning my marker. Now you could just put it on very intentionally and dark, but I kind of like that more random effect. And so I'm going to do some darker marks in between here. And then just kind of play. I'll put some limey green down. Let's see, maybe this color of green. See how that works. That's beautiful. So I'm not doing a ton of green, just along the edges and where I hope my branches will land, more or less. But I also want to put in some purple. Maybe let's start with this lighter purple here. Right about here. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then, let's see, maybe some pinky tones, just a little bit, because I'm going to paint with pink too. In fact, let's not do much of this, but this will be like the blossoms in the background that are very blurred and far away, and then I'll come and paint on top of it some more pronounced or more delineated petals and blossoms. But these can be the farthest way away ones. Maybe a little bit more green, and then we'll stop on this one for now and let it dry. You can also come back in and they activate just like watercolor. So if that was too harsh, I could soften it up pretty easily. You get a piece of hair in there too. So that's a good start on that one. Maybe some more of that lavendery blue. I do like this a lot. Let's see, find another one. That's too pink. I wanted it to be a little bluer, lavender blue. Let's see here. Maybe this just off of the tip of it, maybe that would be better. Might have to put some regular blue in there. Like this one. Nope, like this one. There we go. That's quite dark, not the right color that I wanted, but now maybe I can put this pinky one on top of it. This one, the regular purple. and it started to dry, so we'll quit that one for now. Okay, this one, I am going to use the Dr. P.H. Martin's dyes again because I actually really want the intensity, and I'm going to do a little bit of a combination of negative painting and the reverse of that. Start with the heart itself, but then I'll come back and do some negative painting around the outside edge. And so I really want the intensity here. So I'm going to use some greens in this instance. And so I brought over the, this one says olive green. Let's just see how, it might be a little bit too intense. It also might not open. There we go. So these you can push around a little better with water, but I'm going to go ahead and drop some of that in and then have it slowly shift towards, here's hooker's green, the more bluer greens on the other side. This one is all but gone. That's done. Very old. Some of these are 20, 30 years old. Let's move now towards the more bluer green on the other side. Actually, I'm going to go straight to turquoise on the other side. And then the interior, or the exterior, will be some other colors. And now with some water, we can kind of move and mingle those together. And they should make a really lovely combination. I cannot see the outer edge of my heart, but I think that that's close enough. That's very heart-like. So let's let that one dry and I can come back and do the exterior. And then on this last one, I can go back to the watercolors. So let me put these aside and grab the watercolor. And so for this one, I want just some really bright, intense colors. I'm just going to pick up permanent yellow deep. That's a nice bright yellow, yellowy, warm yellow for one side of it, and go into some hot pinks and just really, really bright colors. Now they will fade. They always do, right? Let's pick up some cobalt violet. That's nice and bright. Go along the top with that. And then I'm going to come into some red. And I love how it's bleeding, and that's just wonderful. We'll just leave it like that. Some quinacridone pink, how about that? That'll be really pretty in there mixed up with that. And then come from that into some more scarlety red, like quinacridone red or cadmium red. How about that? Down here in the bottom. Now I really want to make sure I get good milky consistency at least, if not creamy, so that it's thick enough to be vibrant, but still thin enough that it will travel. So in that case, it wasn't quite thin enough, so it wasn't traveling. We'll come back with a little more of that really bright quinacridone pink and put it up against these other colors. And then I'm gonna take some more purple down towards the bottom here. This is lovely. Not even sure what color it is, but we used it up in here in one of these. And some orange. Yellowy orange here. And then that's all I'm going to do. I am going to drop a little bit of water into that. Just a few little drops, just to force some blooms. And that will make it bleed a little bit better too, into one to the other. It creates some lovely effects. And then all of these need to dry before we go any further with the texture. I've come back in on top of this one. I wasn't liking how harsh the drops became. I came back in on top of it with a little bit of Dr. P.H. Martin's pen white. It's a very opaque white ink. And that was intense, so I also came back and dabbed at it with a little bit of Kleenex to soften it. And this will make a lovely background for something I have planned for this one. And in this instance, I did sprinkle some salt on it. So now we really have some drying time to have happen here before we can go any further. So just for fun, I'm going to use this little it's meant to be a tree, but I think if I put it on and sort of use it as a way to mask and get some random shapes and texture, it might just work really well. I'm picking up my Fine Tech watercolors. They take a little time to activate, so I had already put some water on there. I've got it good and moist and pretty thick. And I just sort of dab at this and hope that it'll go in between the spaces here for just another little bit of textural influence, textural interest beyond what's already happening, because it was done in such a wet on wet manner. Now I'll lift this in just a minute when I feel like I've got enough happening in here. Let's just see how that looks. And that's definitely very interesting. Now, because I got it on my stencil, I could probably flip it over and have it be the reverse of that and very stem-like in some areas. So let's just see how that works. I'll get a fair amount of paint on it. So this is today all about just playing with whatever you have, and we're just creating some background so that we can go back in and really say what fills our hearts in our garden. And that's going to be up to you. You might want to do pen and ink drawings of your favorite plants. You might want to do a rendering of a really nice rendering of a hummingbird, or there's so many things that you could do. And that creative play is going to be up to you. Now, that is enough on that one, I think. And I need to clean these up, and then we'll go on to the next. I have some pearlescent ink, and it's pink, and most likely you don't have that same thing. Maybe you have the Fine Tech set and there's some pinks in there. I just wanted to splatter a little bit over here on this heart that's got so much going on it. Just thought it would be kind of fun. Now I'm going to try and shield some of the other areas off, and other than this paint thing here, I'm not sure I have much that I can do that with, but just splatter it here and there. The consistency is good enough that it does well with the splattering. And then I think I'd like to also come in with a smaller brush and just make a couple little hearts on this one and this one as well, again with the same pearlescent ink. And again, a little redirection here, change of heart, so to speak. I have a little pink gel pen, and so I can just do that with this. Put some little hearts on there. That's one way. There's just no end to things that you could do, and it's going to be a very personal choice as to what you want to do on yours. So I'm showing you a lot of different things just so that you might feel inspired then to take this even a step further and find other ways to make marks on these little hearts. And I think 3 is enough of those. And now let's try something in the background, or this, to do that sort of negative painting around the heart. And then there'll be flowers on top of that at another point. So there's a couple ways I can do that. I have some of these little watercolor sticks by Dan Smith, and they are very much like regular watercolor, except that the form factor is different. And so if I wanted to do a little bit of negative to paint outside of this heart, I could just go along and draw around the outside edge of it, and then activate that with some water. And that should give me some really intense color right up next to the edge that I can blend out then quite easily. It gives me a really nice effect, sort of a harsh edge that I wanted there, and then blend it into nothing beyond that. And then I can bring in some other colors as well. But that gives it a nice finish to that side. I can come down with, I just have a couple colors of this, so I think I'll use this yellow, or this green, if I can open it, to do the same, particularly up around the top of this. I really want it dark up in here, so this is going to get me cover a lot of ground quickly. And then I'll switch to another color. It gives it a nice finished edge, some intensity to match what's going on the inside. But it can also then kind of come up and start to give this sense of leaf shapes by utilizing my brush. And maybe those will work into the background. I'm not sure what I'm doing up here yet, but that will give me a start. I like that there's another color that kind of popped up in there. And I can come back in on top of that even with that same watercolor stick and darken areas, wet into wet. It just gives it some depth. It changes things a little bit. Now, I don't have a lot of those colors, so I might add some others with the marker because that works really well as in the same way. I can pull out a little purple here. Should really, really darken up in here. I might want to go just a little bit along one side here, and I don't have to go along all the sides. Some can remain empty, white. And as always, the difficulty is knowing when to stop. And I think when you get to that point, that's a good time. That's a good indication that you need to stop. So I'm going to let this dry. I can always add more, but I think for now, let's let that one go. And there's a couple more things that I want to do once this is dry. In our example with the red that's got the gold texture to it, I've decided to put some scribbles to sort of define the outside edge and just do some little dots here and there. But the gold gel pen works really well. You could flick some gold paint on there as well. Either way works, whatever tool you have. Just play. This is all about playing.